Donald Trump continues making enemies across the world. He lectured to Europeans at the United Nations summit that Europe should apply United States immigration decisions in Europe and that they should adopt United States decisions on economic relationship with Russia. With regards to Venezuela, he repeated the same known threats on bombing civilian ships and preventing all countries from the Caribbean from fishing as the United States pretends to bombard everywhere. He blocked Emmanuel Macron from crossing a street in New York City as a punishment for France's recognition of Palestine. Donald Trump domestically also canceled a meeting with the Democratic Senate and House of Representatives leaderships, suggesting that he has no friends left anywhere, either domestically or internationally. He was able, though, to hold a summit meeting with Javier Milei of Argentina, and Milei looks submissive as he is waiting for a rescue aid package money that will come from the United States Department of the Treasury, which, as far as we understand, is also broke, as Chinese, Japanese, Saudi Arabian, and other major investors have swiftly canceled their treasury bonds. The letter that Nicolas Maduro sent to Donald Trump was received and read, according to Caroline Leavitt, but they wish to maintain the hard pressure. The problem is that they are no longer escalating. They are just hoping that maintaining a predictable plateau will be enough. Meanwhile, here in Venezuela, we continue business as usual. There are no long lines at the supermarket, suggesting that people are no longer considering an invasion as likely. And there was a government-supported street protest against imperialism and against invasion. And President Maduro continues his daily schedule with other members of the government, planning economic and military policy. Social media in Venezuela seems to recover the narrative of eventually entering the former United States Embassy building, where the Venezuelan instigator of invasion, Maria Machado, is in hiding so that she can be put in prison. However, Diosdado Cabello has guaranteed that will not be necessary unless the United States strikes or invades continental Venezuelan territory. Gustavo Petro of Colombia is in New York. He has bravely spoken against many of the measures of Donald Trump, and there are rumors that he could be arrested while on United States soil due to a special lawsuit. None of that is confirmed. We are waiting for his speech at the United Nations, which will be probably described on my next show. The leader who actually did speak was Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva of Brazil, who deplored United States' malicious behavior against Haiti, Gaza, and Venezuela. It is interesting because Brazilian president was at odds recently with Maduro, but it seems that this Latin American sentiment of unity as we face common threat from the United States is uniting us again. That will be significant because there are unconfirmed rumors that Venezuela could actually be considered again for full membership at the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and more recently Saudi Arabia, Iran, United Arab Emirates, Ethiopia, and Egypt, plus a number of observer countries. Venezuela was invited to join, but at the last minute, Brazil blocked Venezuela's entrance because of Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva's remarks on Venezuelan presidential elections last year. Fortunately, the impasse has been settled, and China and Russia, which are strong allies of Venezuela, would benefit from Venezuela becoming as a full member, because that would ease their military entrance into South America to defend the Caribbean. Russia has also conducted high-level military talks with Nicaragua leadership as a Caribbean front is beginning to take shape for possible Russian dissuasion of United States ships, as most countries in the Caribbean are feeling harassed by United States military presence throughout the region. Venezuelan military authorities are conducting necessary counter-narcotic operations in eastern Venezuela, notably in Paria Peninsula, which borders Trinidad and Tobago. It is necessary to exercise caution with our brothers, sisters, and friends from Trinidad and Tobago, which is a highly respected country that Venezuelans, for the most part, cherish. Venezuelan military personnel in Paria Peninsula is conducting investigations for detaining drug traffic activity known to have happened earlier in the year in the region. Trinidad and Tobago authorities and population have long asked that drugs do not enter from Venezuela. Therefore, in order for Venezuela to comply with that Trinidad and Tobago request to reduce the amount of drugs coming from Venezuela into Trinidad and Tobago, it is necessary that the Venezuelan authorities produce extensive searches within Venezuelan domestic territory of Paria Peninsula to put out of business the drug trafficking entities that operate out of Paria Peninsula, and that would be to the benefit of Trinidad and Tobago security, as there would be less drugs coming into Trinidad and Tobago from Venezuela. By no means the Venezuelan military is seeking to invade Trinidad and Tobago. Venezuelan authorities have stressed out very clearly that we would only consider entering Trinidad and Tobago territory if the United States invades Venezuela from Trinidad and Tobago, and that has not happened, or at least that has not happened yet. So Venezuela has no reason to invade Trinidad and Tobago at this time. What our authorities are doing is detaining possible drug traffickers that usually export drugs into Trinidad and Tobago. It would be necessary that the governments of Prime Minister Kamala and President Maduro resume their high-level conversations as border security concerns both countries. Foreign Secretary of Venezuela, Iván Gil, has not wasted his time in New York waiting for his address later in the week to the United Nations General Assembly. He has conducted high-level meetings with prime ministers and foreign ministers of the following countries: Oman, Togo, Ghana, Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, South Sudan, Mali, Burkina Faso, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, Belize, and Serbia. These are 12 countries that were not recently addressed in formal meetings, which suggests that the list of nations supporting the Venezuelan cause of not being invaded by the United States continues growing. While the alliances of the United States continue being weakened, we also have the example of Italy. The Italian Prime Minister did not support statehood of Palestine, and as a result, there are massive protests throughout Italy, accompanied by labor strikes, which do not seem to fade away. We should expect speeches from China or Russia at the United Nations later in the week to get a clearer idea on what will be the great powers' response to the arrogance of Donald Trump. Vladimir Putin, however, just warned that the United States may not be allowed to be the lone superpower and that Russia will increase its military, diplomatic, and political capabilities to make sure that the world has balanced voices, which is encouraging for the case of Venezuela and the Caribbean, as it seems like Russia will protect the Caribbean under the Russian umbrella. Of course, that hope would be enhanced if Venezuela is finally admitted into BRICS. In the next summit during October, which will be held in Brazil. Venezuela would be a Caribbean country within BRICS, approaching geographically the territory of the United States. Puerto Rico remains in the Caribbean. Puerto Rico remains occupied by United States troops and military, and Puerto Rico continues to protest for the removal of United States military equipment as it violates Tlatelolco Caribbean Treaty of Peace. The United Nations, though, is celebrating its 80th anniversary, and we should question why Donald Trump was able to speak beyond half an hour, and the president of Peru, Dina Boluarte, was making an interesting speech on women's rights, and her microphone was silenced after just a few minutes. The balance of power in the world does not reflect the actual composition of the United Nations Security Council. United States so far has been able to block all Gaza and Palestine related measures and looks desperate to provoke war everywhere in the planet, even though Donald Trump was supposed to make peace. Afghanistan is another place of great concern that is little by little gaining ground on the news cycle. The Taliban resisted United States occupation during 20 years. They were finally successful in expelling the United States under Joe Biden's administration, but now Donald Trump wishes to invade Afghanistan back and take over a base which is owned by the Afghans. It turns out that countries with United States bases are increasingly finding them a nuisance and want the United States out of such bases. And we should expect United States bases in Colombia to be depleted of military personnel of the United States within the next few years. The situation in Ukraine is becoming dire. Food shortages have been announced in Kyiv, the capital. United States and Europe stubbornly wish to continue war in Ukraine at all costs, and it seems that Russia will eventually prevail at the expense of further bloodshed. While in the Mediterranean, the humanitarian aid flotilla that departed Barcelona, Spain a few days ago is about to arrive, and it will be escorted by the militaries of Egypt, Turkey, and other countries interested in trespassing the naval blockade imposed by Israel so that the Gaza population continues to starve. It has been refreshing to see a photograph of President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, along with the Emir of Qatar. Colombia has always been one of the most enthusiastic supporters of the Palestine fight for freedom since the very beginning, and Qatar, which is suffering the consequences of having been a mediator against treacherous Israel, suggesting that a common Latin American Arab approach will be made soon. That division of labor looks promising. Colombia can concentrate in uniting Latin America with the Arab world, while Venezuela may continue uniting Latin America and the Caribbean with Africa. We understand that CARICOM used to have bilateral meetings with African countries, and some of the prime ministers of Caribbean nations, such as Trinidad and Tobago, did not attend the African summit. Even though Venezuela is not part of CARICOM, Venezuela is graciously applauding most of CARICOM's defense for Caribbean and African unity and completely supports any integration of the peoples of the global south. Poor Europe seems completely at the mercy of themselves. They have made many political mistakes during the last few years, and now Denmark feels threatened by drones all over their country, and they had to evacuate many locations. It is necessary that Europe learn how to live with Russia because they are neighbors. They share the Eurasian continent. Europe is just a peninsula in the western part of Eurasia. And Europe, by the way, deserves more than just being a joke of Donald Trump. Many of the expressions that Donald Trump joked about Europe are unwarranted. London is a multicultural city with a great Hindu and Islamic heritage, just as Madrid has also become a melting pot of diaspora from Latin America. London should not be ridiculized by Donald Trump. He's probably making those comments to influence the forthcoming election in New York City, which will probably be ruled by a new mayor with the same multicultural abilities as the current London mayor. Reports suggest that the visit of Donald Trump to the British royalty did not go well, and by all means it seems that the only friends Donald Trump has left are Netanyahu and Milei. Milei from Argentina, we don't know how long he will survive. Argentina was supposed to be a country that would be great economically, and they still are having a debt crisis, just as in the Perón and Cristina Kirchner and Fernandez governments. It looks like the Argentine debt crisis is permanent. It's not temporary. With any government, Argentina will always have a debt issue. Even Venezuela had to pay for Argentine debt not too long ago. Now it seems that the United States will use their own funds to bail out Argentina. And Benjamin Netanyahu, we don't know what will he do. Will he be able to block the humanitarian aid flotilla that is approaching the Eastern Mediterranean? If there are so many militaries of the Arab world coming, we are seeing that the nuclear alliance of Pakistan and Saudi Arabia continues taking shape. We are seeing convergence between Yemen and Saudi Arabia, and the solidarity of Qatar and Colombia opens the door for great Arab relationship. Venezuela now has the goal of improving our oil extraction capabilities so that we can demand a higher quota within the OPEC plus countries, and Latin America can become relevant again in the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, so that the organization looks global again rather than just concentrated in the Eastern Hemisphere. That is another geopolitical reason why Russia, Iran, and China are so determined in Venezuela succeeding in this war against the United States. Venezuelans are willing to fight the United States if that is the case. Because if Vietnamese and Afghans have been able to successfully defeat the United States, after long years of battle, Venezuelans will follow suit. Fortunately, President Nicolás Maduro prefers to deplete the diplomatic dialogue options, and he has promised to continue writing letters to Donald Trump to explain how peace may prevail against fake news and commercial interests from the industrial military complex.